And it says, I will fall upon them like a bear robbed of her cubs. Now the imagery drawn here is for the he-bear or the she-bear, how ferocious and dangerous it is when someone interferes with her cubs. And the relationship between the she-bear to her own young, the cubs, is so intimate that if anything happens to her, she is there to rescue and protect her cub. If I have to move this to our own context, I am a she-bear. You are a he-bear. And that we have children, and that we have cubs, and we are to protect them. It is our business. It is a God-mandated business that we protect our children. Now this kind of characteristic is not our own. We imitate this from God, because God himself is the ultimate he-bear. You know, in Psalm 60, am I moving? Okay, Psalm 68, verses 5 to 6. It says, God is the father of orphans and protector of widows. His God is his holy habitation, and God gives the desolate home to live in. So, if you look into this, the orphan is not one who has no father, because God is his father. And the orphan is not one who has no home, because God is providing him a home. Of course, God doesn't come down to the earth and then provide a home. He doesn't come down and be the father. But as he moves from his picture of being the ultimate he-bear, he moves into his exhortation. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 19, when he said, you shall not abuse any widow or orphan. If you do, I will surely heed their cry. So this is a biblical mandate for us to respond to the other cubs, not of our own, not our own young, to respond and be protector of them. So how can we do this? Let me go to the first point. Oh, thank you. I'm learning. Number one is the establishment of community care center. This is a project that is like in between the traditional residential homes and the one that I have just learned in this conference, which is the DI, right? And what is a community care center? It is a cluster of homes in a community setting that provides family-like experiences to vulnerable children. Its objectives are to restore both the immediate and long-term losses of abused children. So we got the inspiration from Niklas, the concept of a good family. So one is that in a family-like community center, the members would express a great deal of appreciation to one another. And this is what is happening in a family, in our nuclear family. But how is this happening in the community center? I'll just give one example. In the community center, recognition and appreciation is not done once in a while. Like if you have good grades at school, and at the closing of the school, you get medals and ribbons, and that's how you are recognized. But at the community center, recognition and appreciation is every day. Example, if one of our children picked a piece of paper on the ground and brings it to the compost pit, then we say, that's good. You're helping the community clean. And we do not wait another day to recognize the good thing that he has done. And another special feature in the community center in relation to appreciation is we are cultivating disciplined vocabularies. When we say disciplined vocabularies, we are encouraging every member in the community, from children to adults, to really practice words that will come out from our mouth to be blessing the children and everyone. The next feature is we have high degree of commitment to one another. In this kind of concept in the family, I'm jumping, is number 2. We spend a lot of time together, not because we have to, but because we enjoy doing it. One very good practice is that every Saturday at the community center is a community cleanup day. And Saturday morning, everybody in the community, the children, the house parents, the staff, we go out and clean the community. But what the children are expectant is, Filipinos love to eat. So it's just that once Charlotte described the Filipinos as from the womb to the tomb, there's always food. So that after the cleanup, there's a long table, and the house parents or those that are older in the community prepare food. We just pick vegetables within the community. It's not really that special, but what is special is that we gather together and we enjoy. And these are the things that the children are expecting, because these are the things that are seen in the family. So this is happening. And thirdly, we have high degree of commitment to one another. It's not only the house parents that are taking care of the children, but the older siblings. That's why we call them siblings, because we're family. The 16-year-old boy takes care of the 2-year-old boy. The 10-year-old girl after class takes care of the 2-year-old girl. So we have a high degree of commitment to one another. We always say, I am here for you. So it's happening in the family, it's happening in the community care center. Of course, it's not perfect. Children in the community quarrel. As in children in our homes, they quarrel too. But we try to cultivate this atmosphere of understanding and be generous of forgiveness and be humble enough to apologize. That's the next feature that we are cultivating as a family-like community center. And there is that strong concern for spiritual development. Most of the time, we have organizations that work for children, and this is the component that's missing, the spiritual development. That is why it's only the church that can really do holistic child development, because the component, the spiritual dimension, is missing. And so it is in this juncture that the children are taught reverence of the Lord with this obedience. We do prayer for the children and prayer with the children and children praying for other children. And this kind of atmosphere is operating in the family-like community care center. And another feature of family-like community center is that we handle crisis in a positive way. We always tell children, we're family here. We are not a secondary group. We are a primary group, so that we can always settle everything. And then we always remind ourselves that we may have been in bad situations. We have been abused. We have been suffering. We have been into vulnerable situations. We are reminding our children that it's not the bad situation that makes you bad. It is your reaction to the situation that makes you bad. So if we can just be positive in how we react to the odd circumstances and odd experiences that our children have gone through, then that will be the start of the healing of the inner one that our children are having, especially those long-term losses that our children are having. Okay, let me go back and I'll move fast. Another feature of the Community Care Center, this employs what Dr. Phyllis Kilborn says, the STOP model. time. O for organized and free play. Then P for parental care. Okay, it's not working. Let's just continue. A family, a good family, must have structure and boundaries. Many times, people who are working in the traditional homes will just say that there's so much regimen to do. But when our children are taught that structures and boundaries are placed for their safety, they would appreciate that. And they would not be rebellious against that. And then, if structures and boundaries are in place, like in a family, we are developing in our children the attitude to be law-abiding, to be following rules. And when they become grown-ups, then there will not be a problem to the society. Letter T is talking and time. This is both intentional and informal. So if there are big issues among the children, we come and call our children. But oftentimes, the adults and the other members of the community can just sit down anywhere and talk. Like one time in the evening when the moon was very bright and there was this falling star, the little girl who was with me said, "Stop talking, Mama Tess," because they called me Mama, "stop talking, I'll make a wish." And then I kept quiet. And then after I said, "What was your wish?" And I said, "I wish I would find my mother, because we have not located her." So with that informal conversation with the girl, then you would know the desires of her heart, and you would know what to do. So those are some important things that we give our children. Organized and free play. We played yesterday, and that was very good. And organized play help children process behavior, process attitude. But we have free play for physical conditioning. And that is part in a family setting. And the letter P is parental care. In the community center, we have three important things in the employment of house parents. One is that he must have sensed the call to be parents. Because we do not just employ one because you need to work. Because if your purpose of going to the community center is just to land a job and get paid, then please do not come. Because ours is a ministry. And then you must be lovers of children. You must love children. So those are the qualifications of very crucial in the recruitment of the house parents. So the community care center, after having ministered to the healing of children, especially the long-term losses, we do not divorce them from the family. From time to time, we contact the family. The family are asked if there are parental advocates that are still present, they come and visit. Or the children can go and visit their families. So we do not divorce the child from the family until such time that they can be reunited. Now let me move to number 2 because time is very close. I hope that you have seen. This is just the last thing that I would like to share. I'll just finish this. Because the next one is abuse is the street children. And I was asked, how do we do with our street children? I'm sorry we don't have the diagram there, but the first thing that we can do with street children is establish day center and night shelter. I do not believe there are so many street children here in Africa as we have in the Philippines. But the day center and the night shelter is the first place where children can go. We do not place street children in residential homes because they will not surely live there for a day. The hope of street life will always invite them to go back to the street. So we have day centers, a place where they could say, oh, if I'm tired in the street, if I do not have food to eat, if I'm tired of playing, I know there is a place that I can go. And this day center is also converted into a night shelter because we have curfew in the evening so that they have a place to sleep. be protected. In this day center and night shelter, we establish rapport and friendship with the children. And we try to complete our profiling with who the street children are. Then, from the day center and night shelter, we move to what we call halfway home. As if in the day center, the children, let's move to the diagram for the street children so that I can just, it's not working. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I'll just keep moving. I'm talking now about halfway home. From the day center, yeah, that's it. Okay. So we have the day, it's not on the screen. From the day center to the night, on the night shelter, they move to the halfway home. Halfway home because this is a time where the child has started receiving education, okay? And then, let us still expect that the child will go back to the street. Do not get frustrated. Will still go back to the street. But it is in this stage that the street children will come into informed decision to live street life. So we do not know how long he will be in the halfway home, but it is hoped that after the halfway home, this child will move to the community care center. Okay. He will move to the community care center or to foster families. But let us be watchful with it. The foster families can only receive children after they have been licensed as foster families, and the children are prepared. Then from the community care center or foster families, the children will be reintegrated to their families. That is with the expectation that the families are already prepared to receive the child. That is the understanding. Or if the child has been empowered and have been provided with skills, then they can go for independent living. So that is the pathway for our street children. The last two things very briefly, because our country, I do not know if it's happening in here, the trafficking of children. One thing that we can do as people is to provide safety posts in all entries and exits. So airports, seaports, bus terminals, we must have people to be there to really be watchful of suspicious people whom we see are having children with them. Another way of protecting children from being trafficked is establishment of safety posts in hotels, in resorts, and other establishments of the like, so that if we see people who are having with them young girls or young men and they will see they are his children, then you will think otherwise. So make sure that the post entries and exits are well guarded. Make sure that the hotels and the resorts are also well guarded. These are the things that we can do to protect our children from being trafficked and being abused. Now, I would like to close. I know it's already time. I would like to close with a very important saying from a child when he said, "A childhood is a time of joy and happiness. But when it's lost, it's not really lost forever. And when there are people who takes care of us and nurtures us and protects us, then we can reclaim what was lost and be able to live normal lives." So in this conference, I would like to encourage each one that we be nurturers and protectors of children that he bears, and the she bears for the other accounts that are not ours. God bless us all.
Thank you, Reverend Teresita, and we really apologize for the technical hitch. You adapted well, and we appreciate that. So we'll go to the next speaker. And it's interesting that in the Philippines, they like food like in Kenya, from womb to the tomb. That was an interesting analogy. Okay, so we'll have our next speaker. That's Sherry Sasino. She's the founder of the social enterprise Global Storymakers, which is an online platform that helps teachers and parents ignite a passion for writing in children. As a lifelong storyteller, she teaches children the power of written communication as a means of building self-esteem and community building. She is the author of 10 books. As the owner of an international cost-related marketing firm, Sherry worked in 82 countries and developed socially responsible and effective work strategies for some of the world's largest companies, often in partnership with NGOs and government agencies. She worked in West Africa, Russia, and Central America as a marketing specialist. She holds a Master's of Advanced Studies in Children's Rights Law, an MBA from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and a bachelor's degree in journalism. She also studied international finance at Oxford University in England. She's currently the chairwoman of the International Advisory Board of the African Institute for Children's Studies based in Nairobi, Kenya, and in the leadership team of the Global Book Alliance, which is committed to creating a world with 250 million children literate. Help me to welcome Sherry Sasino.
Thank you, everybody. I don't work on a PC, I work on a Mac, and it usually tells me how to do it, so we'll see how it goes. Let's see, I'm not sure. Which one I first advance it, so this is, we're going to put it on here and then just, okay, I'm going to do that. We're going to give it a shot. Oh, that would be good. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Sorry, everybody. Just learning as I go here. Okay. We have a lot of global issues, and we have child protection issues. There are laws, and there's social workers, and there's ministries, and human acts of kindness designed to combat injustices. All of us are here to help, and all of us are here to make the world a better place. But I start with the question, why do we actually gather here? Why do we have laws? Why do we have the Sustainable Development Goals? Why do we even need the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child? Who in the world would ever want to harm a child? We gather at these global conferences to learn best practices on managing within unjust confines. But shouldn't we really discuss how to improve? Can we move this down? Let's see. Wait, I did it wrong, wait. But I'm trying to move the top down. See this, I'm trying to move that down. Okay. There we go. This one. Okay, we gather at these, wait, sorry, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to do this, I'm so sorry. See, it goes all the way down, so. What do I do that? You're doing it, I need to show me. Teach the child. Don't do it for the child. So this, I just move it this way. But it's So okay, good. So my question is, why do we discuss how to improve the juvenile justice system? Why don't we discuss how to do away with the need to incarcerate children? We discuss how to care for children living on the streets, and how do we even allow for one child to not have a happy and healthy home? We all brought something to the conference, and we all bring something to our community, our families, our communities, our world, and ourselves. But how did we discover our own passions and our own talents, and how do we offer the same to children? We need to join together to help. How do we know we can draw if we didn't know there was art? How do we discover a cure for malaria if we think illness is caused by demonic possession? How do we grow nutritious food if we don't understand the soil? The greatest gift we can give ourselves is our own empowerment and the empowerment of others. If we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves. We must change our minds about people, who we are, and about who we believe other people are. We must decide that no one is inherently vulnerable, but instead our systems put our brothers, sisters, and children at risk. Okay, let me touch this. It doesn't work. Okay, touch it again. Okay, wait, it's working. Sorry. We need to fundamentally address our basic assumptions and explore how we can systematically shift how we perceive each other. We all bring something of value to the table, but how do we know our special talents and interests? It's through discovery, by being free to explore ourselves and to watch how we do things and how other people do things. But how do we discover each other, and how do we bring others into our world and into the lives of our children? We do that by becoming literate. More than 1 billion people in the world have never read a book. Imagine that. Reading brings us into other worlds. Stories can take us on adventures. We can walk on the surface of the moon and swim with the sharks all in one afternoon through reading books. I'm not sure. Sorry. Okay, I don't understand these computers. Books open us to new worlds. By reading about new things, our interests grow, and we begin to define ourselves differently. A child can imagine walking on the moon because someone else has done it. Another child will learn about medicine and imagine discovering a cure for a disease because one of their family members has it. By learning about new ideas, they gain a future that they design. They can learn to trade a life of boredom for a life of learning. Books give them choices. If 1 billion people on our planet are illiterate, then 1 billion people do not have the advantage of making different choices than the ones they've made. For them, they may not have known they had different choices to make. I would often consider how much richer our world would be if an additional 1 billion people could actually make a contribution to the world in which they are living and bring their unique talents to that. There's only one person who first walked on the moon, and I wonder how many firsts we've lost because our systems didn't allow for 1 billion people to have an equal opportunity to learn to read. If children knew they could become astronauts, would they ever become terrorists? Understanding that recruitment and extremism is not voluntary, but those who lead terrorist organizations target the illiterate and those who cannot see their own future. I'm part of a movement dedicated to bringing children books in their mother tongue languages. Our goal is to bring books to all children everywhere. We hope to bring stories into the homes and the communities that currently have no books. We want them to learn to read in their own languages while living at home and begin to discover their discovery into new worlds. Article 17 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child calls for children to be educated in their own language, into the language they speak at their home. But it's not always financially feasible for a publisher, and it's not always financially feasible for a government to address that. Financial feasibility should not be a barrier to the realization of human rights, but it often is. As people who care, we need to continue to look for all ways that can be realized and granted to all people, especially the children. It's time for innovation and empowerment. Often our foundational domestic policies negatively impact our work in child protection. Systematic change comes when policy, practice, and theory collide. Our goal at these meetings is to bring them all together. In the case of literacy, countries have a national language policy as a means to elevate their country. While the language policy makes sense on many, many levels, it also guarantees that some people will never learn beyond their behaviors passed down from generations, and others will become targets for illegal activity, gangs, and terrorism. While it's good domestic policy to have a uniform language in education, many miss the opportunity to learn from the places they start. When children have a weak foundation for learning, they begin at a disadvantage, which puts them at risk of learning and behavior problems. It requires investment in remedial support to help them catch up. This support puts financial strain on all resources and continues to strain that resources for their entire lifetime. Today, millions of children are entering school ill-prepared to learn and to read because the tradition of reading was not practiced at home. This issue is prevalent in developing countries where parents are less likely to engage in early learning activities with their children. The brain develops at its fastest rate at a very young age, prior to school entry. This is the ideal moment to strengthen a foundation for later learning and development. This foundation is developed at first at home with a positive environment that engages the child and assures their well-being. Reading and storytelling is a way of building bonds with children, with their family, and their community. A negative environment, on the other hand, with experiences such as neglect, abuse, and poor nutrition, will result in weak and poorly formed neural connections. A child's early learning experiences at home in an early learning education should include the promotion of emergent literacy, which is pre-reading knowledge, skills, and attitudes that form the first stages of reading development, even if it's just looking at pictures. Address all developmental domains, cognitive, physical, social, emotional, since they are all interrelated. Encourage and foster a positive attitude toward reading and reading achievements, since it has been found to be correlated with the actual achievements in reading. Research has consistently found short and long-term benefits investing in early childhood education programs. Such benefits encompass positive outcomes in education, health, and well-being, and translate into a more skilled workforce, improved efficiency of the education system, reduced expenditure on healthcare and penal systems, and a greater productivity and economic growth. There is an urgency of ensuring access to quality early education programs worldwide. Children in developed countries are more likely to be enrolled in quality early education programs than children in developing countries. Regions with the lowest enrollment rates are Southern Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Northern Africa, and Western Asia. This uneven access within and between countries leaves behind children who need it the most. Additionally, limited or no budget affect the implementation of these programs, which can be dangerous since low-quality early education programs can set children up to fail in early grades. These recommendations are key to ensure that the early childhood investments contribute and not inhibit development and lifelong outcomes. We should increase access to quality early childhood education programs, particularly for vulnerable and disadvantaged children. We need to ensure quality by investing in the teacher development, initial and ongoing teachers. We need to develop age-appropriate and contextually relevant children's books. There's a lot of books out there that are donated from like the United States or France or other countries, but they're not relevant to the local communities. So we need to increase children's exposure to oral language, interactions with books, and development of a positive outlook towards reading. And we also, and the last thing we need to do is ensure a continuum of quality from the home to early education programs into the early grade classrooms. It's essential that children learn first in the language spoken at home by their family. This helps with brain development as well as emotional development of feeling included in the community. As a child grows, they expand their knowledge, and if they're not resources, they can access. If not, they get left behind. The further behind they are, the less likely it is that they can bring their contribution to the world. Who knows who might be the next inventor, the next scientist or musician or teacher? Why would it be a tribal child from Kenya or Ghana or Ethiopia? Surely these cultures have capacity, and so much of it is yet untapped. It's very likely and probable that given a chance, these people can find a solution to their own problems, things that work best for them, and do not have to be imposed upon from the outside. Just imagine that the findings from the papers presented during this conference could become mainstream understanding. Each of you could write and publish a book to demonstrate your findings, and they could benefit children. With an emerging educated population of new learners, their vast experience can be brought into the solution. Children who currently do not have access to learning could one day begin to solve their own problems. When we think about it, who better to improve the circumstances than themselves? After all, aren't they the true experts in their own lives as we are the experts in our lives? We begin to find solutions when everyone is invited to the table, and we have an equal, when everyone has an equal start at a chance in life. It starts with our commitment to literacy, and the children will take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you for indulging me on this PowerPoint.
So thank you very much. The time is well managed, so we'll go to a round of questions. Just to reflect on what Reverend Teresita said, she talked a lot about holistic development of children experienced in the Philippines, and the disadvantage that the Philippines has about tourism attraction. Unfortunately, it's child prostitution, so that's something that they have to deal with, and they're trying to address this through a community center where they bring children, try to inculcate family values and bring children together. They also have a street children program where they provide short-term care. They try to provide them transition as they reintegrate them back to their families. And then she finalized with the safety posts, the need for having safety posts at all areas of entry and exit in countries, and also in hotels, as well as, especially in hotels. So reflect upon that, think of your questions if you wrote them down. And then we had Sherry Sasino, giving the global perspective, the issues affecting children. We talked a lot about policies, all the key players in the children's sector. She talked about learning support, and also about education, about how storytelling can help to build communities and also help children. She talked about early childhood development, and especially the need for education with regards to access, quality, the capacity of teachers to deliver, the need for incorporating language, especially local language, as children learn, and also continuous learning. And then she finished by saying, giving us a challenge that this conference should provide an opportunity to storytell, document well what we've done, and be able to use this for the benefit of children. So we'll take the questions. We'll start from this side. And then I will request the ushers to come and support on this. So on this side, do you have any questions? There are many questions. If the ushers can just move on this one. Please introduce yourself as we ask the question.
Thank you. My name is Wanelo from Children's Services Kenya. My question concern is to Reverend Teresita. Thank you very much for giving us the experience in Philippines. I have two areas of concern. One, you've told us that there are community care centers that are established for children. Maybe you could also give us an insight on who runs these community care centers. Secondly, you talked about the pathway to freedom, where children are integrated progressively from halfway home to foster families. Are there mechanisms that are in place to ensure that there is no relapse and follow-up of cases of children that are independently living? Thank you.
Let's have the next.
Good morning. My name is Mark Hare, also from the Department of Children's Services, and I work in a statutory institution that is a juvenile remand home. My question also goes to Reverend Teresita, and I wanted you maybe to explain to us the case management process that you follow step by step while carrying out that duty of rescuing and later on tracing and even reintegrating children. Thank you.
I'm Jacinta Wensi, also from the Department of Children's Services Kenya. And I want to applaud our key speakers this morning. I think they have touched our lives. That's why we are here. To our referent, I have a concern. You talked of the pathway to freedom for our children in the street. And it reminded me this morning, as I was walking to the bus stage to come here, I saw a mixture of children and some adults in the street. And it reminded me and asked myself, what can I do to help these people? They are getting wasted. While when you look at them, they are very energetic, but they are lying in the downside. And my question is, in Philippines, which I know is a smaller country than ours, what strategies are there by the government to ensure that all the children and even those adults are utilized for the nation building? And probably give us a recommendation of the better practice in your country. How best? Because our country here, the numbers are enormous. In fact, it will take the government to invest a lot to ensure these children are actually protected. What measures were there? I don't know, I understand you are not in the government. How did you lobby the government to ensure policies were there to allocate adequate resources to cater for these children? My second question to Madam, the second speaker. You have talked very well about literacy for our children. And I know we have a challenge in our country to ensure that all children receive the required literacy. I would just have you to recommend how best, because we face various challenges in our country, especially in terms of access to the education system, in terms of distances, in terms of facilities, and in terms of resources, human resource. How best can we be able to ensure our children achieve this? And especially our children in the street, who actually do not receive the literacy services as required.
So, this side first. I'll invite Reverend, because there are a number of them, to come and respond. Yes. Yes, from over here. Okay.
I would like to repeat if I got the question. Who runs the community care center? That's the first question. Presently, it's the faith-based organizations that runs the community care center. In the government, what we have are homes for the abused children, but the faith-based organization is running the community care center. And in this stage of ministry, this is the part of the society, the people, to help the government meet the needs of the city, of our country. So we just do not wait on the government. We see it as our part, because we are part of the government. We are the government. And so we see it as a realization. So we established community care centers, operated by faith-based organizations, and funded by the people in the society. Thank you, sir. Have I answered your question? The second one is on the street children, the pathways to freedom. If you remember, I mentioned that the first stage is the establishment of the day center and the night shelter. The day center is where the children come. If they're hungry, they eat. If they need to change clothes, they need to change clothes at the day center. And during nighttime, they come to rest because there is curfew hour. It's not safe on the streets. Just like what Madam said, it's very dangerous to be lying on the streets. You can be killed. So we have a night shelter. And then there is this halfway home. The halfway home education starts. Alternative learning starts. So how is this run? We have volunteers. Then this comes from the different sectors, the academia, the business sector support. Funding really does not come from the government. We are starting to give awareness to our people that there's so much that we can do to provide services to our children, especially those that are on the street. Then from halfway home, they move to community care centers or to their parents and be reunited. Like I said, while they are in this process, their parents are also being empowered, provided with skills, given livelihood projects, so that when their parents are ready, then they can be reunited to their families. That's how it goes in the pathway to freedom for our street children. What's the other one? The case management. The process is that we at the community care center accepts the children who rescues, we have another group. That's why the word has been used, collaboration. We do not do everything. We have another group that rescues. We call them the Set Free Movement. And we all work together. So they are the ones that rescues children that are trafficked and are on the streets and are being abused. And then after assessment, if they needed to be in this center or in this home, then that's the time they are moved. A social worker continues to go on with the process of case update and case studies, and we that operates at the community center is not directly the one doing the management. We have a ratio of 1 social worker to 15 children. That's their job. It's not our job, it's the social worker. The licensed social worker does the job, together with the licensed counselor. The workers in the community center are all stay in. We are not workers that come there 8 o'clock in the morning and go home at 5. No, we're family, we live with the children. That's the concept of community care center. Have I answered?
Just a minute. The question about case management, is it well answered? Because she's trying to address the rescue. I don't know if you do tracing for the children.
No, we do not do the rescue. We have the Set Free Movement as part of the collaborative efforts. The Set Free Movement are the ones doing the rescue. And then once children are rescued, they bring the children to the police and the city social welfare office. And then after all the diagnosis and all the works, then that's the time children are ushered to the community center.
And is there a government strategy that takes care of such children? Does the Philippine government have a strategy?
The Philippine government is really, that's one thing that we are, the faith-based organization and the Philippine government, we make ourselves visible in the government. And the Philippine government supports the efforts that are done by the faith-based organization. And the support is not always monetary. The support can be technical. Yeah, it's not always monetary because in the government, to access funds, you know, you have all these biddings and audits, but it is more fluid in faith-based organizations. But the support that is given by the government is more on the technical component of the operation of the community center.
Maybe the final one. What would you recommend for energetic street families who are helpless?
Oh, families, the street families.
The adults and the children.
Yeah, with street children are street families. And I really do not know what are they doing in the city. Some of us are scavengers. Some are earning their living on the streets. Yes. If they have homes, we do not immediately take out the street families from the street because that is their way of living. But little by little, gradually, as we empower and equip them, provide avenues for them to earn, then that's what the government does. Equip the parents, equip the families, empower them. And when they are, then they will come into informed decision to live street living. That's what the government is doing with street families.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Let's give a round of applause. I think you responded very well. As we invite Sherry, your question was on literacy for children. How best to provide in terms of access, especially when distance is a challenge, facilities and human resource and construction?
Well, that's potentially a very big question. How do you have access how do you provide education for everybody? That's the real question, isn't it? Do you remember before cell phones? We used to have landlines, and you had to have your phone hooked up to your house, and somebody had to come out, and it was just impossible to get phone service to rural areas because we just know it's going to lay the phone line. Remember that? Then we have this thing called cellular service, so we put these towers up, and you could be on safari in the middle of nowhere. You can still take a cell phone call, right? So what we have now is the opportunity to have education in your cell phone. You can have, so which means education and storytelling on every level can be accessed on your cell phone. So that can be done by parents, children, or anyone at all, including anyone who may work with street children, or anyone who works in any community. The problem is access and having stories in those languages, and so having someone who initiates the conversation about stories and the creation of stories in those communities. We are part of the Global Book Alliance, which is a 45-country effort to bring mother tongue stories to early learners. This is a new idea, as I was mentioning in my presentation, in the rural areas and well, throughout the world, because so many people have already, by design, been left behind, because the national language policy prevents certain materials from being paid for and actually physically printed in a book, because they've decided, like in Kenya, it's Kiswahili and English, but there's 46 other tribes who speak mother tongue, and so they're completely left behind until they get to school, and they're forced to learn in a language they don't know. So you can see an inherent problem, right? So what we're doing is taking those books. We now have developed an online platform where if Anne-Marie were to write a book, that book can be uploaded, and then it can be translated into any language. We currently have a language capability of 300 languages, and more languages are being developed all the time. So you could actually download or just look at online digitally a book, depending on the child's reading level. So we're now, it's called the Global Digital Library. There's also African Storybook, and there's World Reader, there's different ones. But that is the direction we're moving. Granted, not everyone has digital capability, but the commitment in Kenya and in many countries is to have the entire country wired and having capacity so that books are readily available on any topic, anywhere. And the Global Book Alliance is building the content so that you're not just learning about the same things, and you're not just learning to read, but you're learning to love stories. And so that's the idea, is you have a diverse number of topics and so on. So that's a long answer. I sure hope it answered your question.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive, and I believe it did. Let's clap for sharing, please. So, because of time, let's take questions from here and there. And then, yes. Ashes.
I am Lina Mongi, a children officer. This goes to Beverage Teresita. I'm asking, you mentioned on the way, the circle of the integration of street children. At some point, a child is allowed to go to a foster family, but you mentioned the licensing. If you're able to tell us how that process goes around, that the foster families are licensed, and if they're licensed, who licenses and the process, and is there monitoring after children are placed in this foster family? Thank you.
Thank you very much, the presenters. My name is Samuel Munui. I work at an institute for children's studies. First question, maybe a comment to Teresita. You mentioned the importance of involving communities, but I come from a rights-based approach, where we say the government collects taxes, and it is responsible for taking care of its children. And that, if just 1% of the population is not taken care of, then the rest of us are in trouble. I don't think it's too expensive for any government to spend a portion of its budget and take care. So my question is there a process in which we are looking at ultimately making sure the government pays for those services? Because I also appreciate that you don't expect a huge government department to take care of such smaller populations. So is there a progress towards that? Secondly, you use a lot of religious-based approach, but then the question is,
The question is, how do you balance between the right of a child to choose their religion vis-a-vis your approach of saying, look, we present to you Christ. What about if we don't want that? Am I forced? Sherry, thank you for the presentation. I do appreciate very much the important role of literacy. I think literature has it that when men moved from the cave and started scribbling, the brain grew to a very large percentage, so it enabled us to do many more things. The question is, the more we move to more digital approach to sharing our stories, and we lose on scribbling, which expanded our brain, is there a risk that we are going to be shrink our brains? And perhaps, is there a way children in communities can continue telling their stories without necessarily having a way of having to publish out there? What benefit come with that? I know if I tell my legendary story, it makes me feel very heroic. Can I tell my story, print out and share it in the community without having to go to the digital so that we address the risk issue? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I've introduced myself before, but my name is Wilkins from Pan Africa Christian University. I'm also in the Association of Social Workers, and there's a question I would really wish you, or something I would wish you shed light on. You talked about fostering, what she asked about, but I wanted, licensing. I wanted just to know if you could shed some light on how we do the licensing of social workers. And then a question to Sherry, yeah. On exposure of digital literacy, I also would wish you mention something on protection of the children. You see, when they are exposed to online, the protection on that online exposure. Have you thought about it, or what do you do about that? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Florence, and my question is directed to Sherry. Sherry, there is a lot of retired teachers in this country, and I believe in many countries. As you develop materials in local languages, have you thought of how we can harness the power and the presence of retired teachers across the country in moving what you are talking about forward and creating a sustainable base where they can also contribute?
Thank you. My name is Joanna Chus. My first question that commendation to Sherry. First, I want to appreciate you because you are using the language children in the streets. And I realize most of us here, we are really using the language street children, which means we don't really differentiate the situation in which someone is living from the person. So for you, that's the insight for then I think it causes a lot to the children, because these children, they are aware. We are calling them street children. It's not that they're not able to say no. They just accept the situation, but deep down, it's a stigma to them. Then two, solicitor, thank you for the presentation. And again, a state-based organization. I think it's just a bit of what one of my colleagues said. The question of denomination, I'm aware Philippines, 95% are Christians. But in the event that you rescue children that are Muslims or from other denominations, how do you balance the question that said that you don't force them going to the church, that there's availability of an imam or somebody for the other denominations? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Epa. I work with Open Homes for Children, and I have 3 questions to Reverend Teresita. The first one is to know whether the difference between what you call traditional residential care and your family-like community centers. The second one is to know whether, from what you hear in presentations related to DI, whether you have anything that should be improved or changed to your approach. And the third would be, the last question is, don't you think that your daycare and night center for children in the street program may be unnecessarily attractive to many more children from the community? Thank you.
We'll have one more because of time.
Jonathan, could you understand, I belong to the Family for Every Child group, and exactly my question, the first question I want to ask Reverend is what the question I asked is DI. You know, we had in the previous presentation that institutionalization is expensive and unnecessary. So we're trying to look at how you should move children from institutions to family care or alternative family care. So it's something we want to hear from you on that and how you work, if that is the system you're using or is different from institutional approach. And my second question is, if you are managing a case where a child is 17-year-old and the child turns 18, who by definition is an adult, what do? Do you still support this vulnerable child, or you let the child leave your sister? And to Sherry, you mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. Realize that in Africa, most, if I'm right, we don't have strong social protection systems in our countries. So realize this is where the government needs to support the families, where families are vulnerable and are unable to protect children. What do you think African governments should do differently with the Sustainable Development Goals to provide support to vulnerable children? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. We close it. I request for the microphones to be brought here, or you can stand and head to it. The first question was, those licensing has 2 levels. What is your process of licensing and who licenses foster parents and social workers? And do they get supported financially? Do they get financial support to take care of children?
Yes. Foster parents, they go a long process when they become licensed, because we do not put children in foster families when the families are not yet licensed. So they go through examinations, psychological tests, and their financial capabilities are looked into. They submit their tax income receipts, and they go through like psychological tests among the husband and the wife to see if they are really capable of having additional children. And not only the parents, but also the children of the family, because if they have children, they really have to be prepared also in accepting the children in their homes. So it is the Department of Social Welfare and Services, maybe also in your country, it's like social services, that would license the family to become foster families. And there is a testing, they will be given a child first in our context, like 6 months, and they see if it's working, and so they are given the full license to become foster families. That's in our context. And a licensed social worker is one who graduates a baccalaureate degree and takes the national exam, a licensure exam with the National Regulatory Board, And if you pass that national licensure exam, then you become a licensed social worker.
Do the foster parents get paid?
The foster parents don't get paid. That is why their economic status are assessed before they are licensed, but they are also receiving subsidy from the government.
Thank you. The next question was is the Philippine government planning to take care of its vulnerable children from the taxes?
From the taxes?
Do you know if there's a process that the government plans to take care of its children? Like in Kenya, that process is there. So
yeah. In fact, in our context, we have poor and vulnerable families. We have what we call the family aid. We call it 4Ps. And so every family, 3 children of the family, will receive a financial aid to support education and food. And so this is part of what the government helps, but it's not enough. That is what the government is supporting. We call it Pantawid program. It's providing the food, the education of poor families. But these children are not on the streets. They are just members of poor families in the locality. Those whose income is, they belong to the poverty index of the society. And so they receive aid from the government. And this has been happening like 5 years now.
Then the next one is on spiritual. Your organization is spiritual-based Christian. So what do you do with children from other religion, and how do you respect the rights of children?
That's why the Breaks is a collaborative effort. It's not basically Christian organizations. We have the government sectors, we have the business sectors, we have the civil society, and in our organization we have the imam, we have priests, we have sisters and nuns all together. And if a child is a Muslim, the imam comes. And if the child is a Roman Catholic, the sisters, the nuns come to nurture the child. And we always respect, because religion is a choice of the person. We always respect that.
And the next one was on residential care. Would you describe your center as a childcare institution, like a large residential care?
What's the difference? Is that the one?
Like, for lack of a better word, is it an orphanage?
It's not really orphanage, it's a community center. Because there are different homes in the community. That's why it's a community center, because in a community center there are different homes. And each home has its own house parent. So the parents live in the home. And he has like 8 to 10 children. So the operation of a home, that's why it's family-like, is what's happening. So we don't have 50 children in one house, no. We have the father and the mother. That's why when you employ house parents, it should be the husband and the wife. No, because you cannot be parent when you're single. You have not been into parenting, right? So when we employ house parents, there's the husband and the wife, who are normally earning their own living, yes. And they take care of these 8 to 10 children in the home. That's a different concept of the orphanage, the traditional orphanage that you are talking about. No, we don't have 50 children in one building. No, it's a home. It's a home.
Thank you for that. And then the next one was you have daycare and night care for children living on the street. Do you think this is attracting children in the community?
Oh, okay. Street children will never be lost on the street. There are always these children coming on the streets, right? As long as there are dysfunctional families, as long as there is the work of the devil, there are always the street children. But the program, the Pathway to Spiritual, the Pathway to Freedom for Street Children is, they are in the process from the day center to the halfway home, they are in the process of being reintegrated to their families. And it's not attracting street children because at the first level in this day center and night shelter, profiling is already done. So at an early stage, when children are seen on the street, we immediately do the intervention so that they will not go through living a longer time on the street. So the profiling is done even at the day center, at the night shelter. So if we're not alone, I said it's a collaboration of all. So many are on the streets, not only Ahon Community Care Center. There are different organizations that are working in the street, the academy. So when we see one child, there's something that's, I just see them 2 days on the street, we immediately go to the child and profile the child and see where the child is. And immediately we do interventions. And if there's possibility, we turn the child to the family.
The next one was a request for your recommendation or your opinion on this. Many countries are trying to institutionalize the orphanages of the charitable children institutions. What would be your recommendation?
Well, that's a good idea to deinstitutionalize. But community center is not an orphanage. And like I said, the home is the best place. My opinion is it's best to return the child to the family, as long as the family now is the best place for the child. If the family is not yet the best place for the child to live, maybe we just worsen the life of the child and continue the abuse. So parallel to the concept of returning to the child to the family is also empowering the family in all aspects, so that when the child returns, the child will continue the developmental process of his life.
Good. And the final one is, what do you do when children grow to an adult age, like in your family care centers?
Okay. We have children, our center, the community center, is from 0. Now, assuming, I do not know, but our age of graduation is 21 years old in our country. I do not know here. But if ever in the middle of from like 2 up to 21, he has no parental advocates, no family found, and he is really an orphan, then he can stay in the community center until he's 21. But during that period, he is sent to college, he's provided skills so that when he goes out for independent living, he can be on his own.
Beautiful. Please let's clap for Reverend Jessica. Those are very, very good and comprehensive responses. I invite Sherry to respond to the questions. So for Sherry, there were a lot of questions on the movement from where we are now to the digital world, what risk it brings, and then will our brains shrink if we stop writing? That was the question. And then what's the online protection? What's your take on the online protection for children?
Okay, let's see how to say this. Right now we have children who are completely illiterate and not a chance that they're ever going to learn, so their brain is going to be developed at a minimum capacity. So by giving them the opportunity to see the words that they speak, so they can begin to understand that this letter or this symbol makes a sound, and they can learn to write. They can learn to read, and then their brains expand. But one of the things that has happened with digital use with children in developed countries is that it has in fact shrunk their brain to some degree, in as much as they lack now imagination. So there are teachers who are working with children and they have a hard time imagining, feeling comfortable imagining something that isn't right in front of them that they can't Google. So there is a real risk with the brain shrinkage or some sort of capacity shrinkage at a certain point. And so I'm looking at what do we do? They're in an online platform. You can actually print books and hold them in your hand. Children there has to be a way of getting those books to the parent, because there's a cost associated with printing, or there really isn't much of a cost associated with putting it on a digital platform. So that's kind of a choice you have to make financially in your own family and in your own community. with regard to the protection, there's multiple protections. This isn't a random thing. There's a library where children download or access a book. Those are generally operated by the government entities, in this case, TUSAMI, the Kenyan Publishers Association. There's many safeguards to having access, and the child's information isn't necessarily known. They access, it's a one-way street kind of thing. So they access and download, so they get the book, or the teacher will. I would invite the retired teachers to engage in the development of imagination. And I would also like to invite the teachers to become part of the process, particularly in indigenous languages, of teaching children how to read, because now they would have access. My experience with teachers is that they teach because they love children and they love to see a child grow. They often stop teaching because the system doesn't allow for that experience on a full-time basis. So in the case of becoming someone in your community, whether you're paid to do this or not, but any person in any family, and particularly teachers in a community, should be able to begin reading circles, reading clubs, writing clubs. In the case of a digital program, in our case, we are encouraging and allowing children to write their own stories so that they can be shared with each other. In the case of the street children, that would be a wonderful way of empowering the street children to have their stories told. I actually went into the Kayole slum here and interviewed the people who run the stalls, the entrepreneurs, and came up with an entire book of process and just incredible stories showing the power of entrepreneurism in the slums and the very difficult, challenging times that they've had. But it gave them a sense of accomplishment, which they have, but it actually spreads that around. So once you start recognizing the people in your community and your own stories, you become more engaged with the reading and storytelling process. One of the other questions was, how do we encourage the governments and particularly developing countries to more creatively advance the SDGs? My focus is exclusively on SDG 4, but I think that means it's exclusively addressing all of them, because education is essential. But what has to happen is policies have to change. We have to decide that everybody matters. As long as we, I keep harping on this national language policy, but when you decide that only the people who speak English and Kiswahili are the ones who are going to learn and advance in this culture, we're going to have a problem. So that has to change. And so, but one of the things that happens is the donors come in, the USAID and the British Council and others come in, and they're the ones who come in with the rules and impose those upon the people who receive the funds. Well, I believe the Kenyans have their own solution. I don't really believe that any some American coming in and giving them a solution. And so I believe Kenyans have their own solutions, and I believe they can innovatively come up with those solutions that address that. And I believe that's what has to happen with the SDGs, because we wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for the developed countries imposing inequities upon the rest of the world. So if we always believed everyone was equal and everyone had the opportunity for the same advances in their lives, the policies would never be as bad as they are, that would affect people so adversely in this world. But I think that we need to allow for and permit innovation to thrive in our countries. And by giving everybody a chance to add contribution, the contribution is very uniquely challenged. I mean, God gave everyone something. just because you can't read, sometimes you're just that far away from it. If we can get access, to give those people access, an opportunity to be heard in the world, I believe the whole world is going to shift. And I believe that's how we're really going to achieve the SDGs by 2030.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for Sherry. I believe she's addressed all of them. And there was a reminder that we should call children living on the street. We shouldn't call them street children. So you're recognized for saying it the right way. So let's do the